This handyman looks like he's hanging around the VIP area to steal something. Adriana Mercer loudly mocked Damien in front of her staff. This insult started a fierce clash between her fake power and Damien's real survival skills. Damien was no ordinary worker. He was a tough, former DSS agent hiding to raise his 6-year-old daughter. Inside Boston's fancy Sovereign Hotel, Damien only wanted to finish his shift to get his full pay. But when an assassin with a ceramic knife slipped past the scanner, Damien had to start a silent hunt. He faced everyone's suspicion and a direct punch from her giant bodyguard, Garrison. When the blade swings, how will this mocked father act in just 2 short seconds? The clock above the loading dock read 6:47 in the morning. Damien Voss pulled his cart of tools down the marble hall of the Sovereign Hotel. His boots made soft squeaks on the polished floor. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with furniture polish and cold morning air from the open service door. He had just $412.31 left in his checking account. Rent was due in 6 days. His daughter Mia needed new shoes for 1st grade. He kept his eyes down and his mind on the work list taped to his cart. The wrench in his hand felt heavy some mornings, heavier than it should. But he never complained, not once, not even to himself. 3 years ago, Damien carried a government badge and a service weapon. He worked for the Diplomatic Security Service, protecting people most Americans never heard of. Now he carried a wrench and a name tag that said maintenance. Nobody at the Sovereign Hotel knew his old life. He liked it that way. His wife had died 2 winters back from a sudden illness. After the funeral, Damien looked at his little girl and made a choice. No more overseas trips. No more danger. Just a quiet job, a small apartment, and bedtime stories every single night. The apartment they shared sat above a laundromat on Cedar Street. At night, the hum of the dryers rose through the floorboards like a small heartbeat. Damien liked that sound. It reminded him the world kept turning, even when his own world had gone still for a while. Mia did not remember much about her mother's face. She was only 3 when it happened, but she remembered the smell of lavender soap, and she still asked Damien to hum a certain tune before she fell asleep. He always did, even on nights when his own throat felt tight and his eyes stung. Damien took this job at the Sovereign Hotel 14 months ago. The pay was small, but the hours let him be home for dinner every night. His supervisor, a kind man named Ruiz, never asked questions about his past. Damien liked that even more than the paycheck. He kept one small photo in his wallet, tucked behind his hotel employee badge. It showed his wife holding baby Mia on a beach in Maryland, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. He looked at it sometimes during his lunch break, sitting alone in the stairway, where nobody could see his face change. Today the hotel buzzed with extra energy. A private reception filled the top floor, hosting 41 guests from a shipping business based in the Netherlands. Security had doubled. Metal detectors stood at every entrance. Men in dark suits spoke softly into their sleeves. Damien saw a flickering light above the east stairway. He climbed his short ladder to check the wiring, staying close to the edge of the roped-off VIP corridor. That was his mistake. That was where Adriana Mercer found him. Adriana ran hotel operations like a queen ran her court. She wore a cream blazer that cost more than Damien's monthly rent. Her heels struck the floor like small gunshots. She stopped in front of his ladder, with 2 junior staff members trailing behind her. "Excuse me." Her voice cut through the quiet hall. "This is a restricted area for our guests today." Damien stepped down slowly. "Just fixing a light, ma'am. I'll be quick." Adriana looked him up and down. She saw his faded work shirt and the grease on his hands. She saw a thread where there was only tired kindness. "This handyman looks like he's hanging around the VIP area to steal something," she said loudly, loud enough for 6 people nearby to hear. The junior staff members laughed nervously. A guest walking past slowed down to watch. Damien felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am." "Then do it somewhere else," Adriana snapped. "We don't need our guests thinking the hotel hires people who look like you." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the marble. Damien picked up his tools without a word. His jaw tightened for just a second, then released. He had faced worse than words from angry strangers. Much worse. He did not know that 70 feet away, a man in a gray suit was walking through the east entrance scanner. The man carried a small ceramic blade hidden inside the sole of his shoe. The scanner beeped once, then went quiet. Nobody checked further. Ceramic does not trigger metal detectors. The man's name, according to his fake papers, was Peter Holloway. His real name did not matter anymore. He had one job today, and he had trained for 11 months to do it. His target sat on the top floor, drinking sparkling water at table 9. Damien rolled his cart toward the supply closet near the kitchen. He passed the man in the gray suit in the hall. Something small caught his attention. The man's shoes were new, but his socks were not matching. His shoulders moved stiff and straight, not with hotel guest ease. Old feelings do not disappear. They just go quiet, waiting. Damien slowed his cart and watched the man from the corner of his eye. The man scanned the hall twice, checking exits like he was memorizing them. Then he walked toward the service stairs instead of the guest elevator. Guests never used the service stairs. Damien's pulse ticked up slightly. He told himself it was nothing. Rich people did strange things sometimes. He had a light bulb to replace and a shift to finish. He needed this paycheck more than he needed trouble. He almost let it go. He almost turned his cart back toward the supply closet, back toward the safe, small life he had built for himself and his daughter. Then he thought of something small but wrong. The man's shoes squeaked slightly on the marble, a fresh rubber sole not yet broken in for walking. Real guests wore shoes that had traveled with them for years. But his feet followed the man anyway, 20 steps behind, quiet as a held breath. Near the mailroom, a hotel clerk almost spotted Damien trailing the stranger. The clerk looked up from her cart of folded towels and frowned. "Everything okay, Damien?" she asked. "You're not usually on this floor." "Just checking a light fixture," he said, keeping his voice light and easy. "Won't take long." She nodded and went back to her towels, never seeing the tension coiled tight in his shoulders. Damien let out a slow breath and kept moving, slow now to stay farther back, slow to look bored instead of alert. The service stairway smelled like old paint and cold cement. Damien's boots made no sound as he climbed. Above him, the man in gray moved fast for someone dressed for a business meeting. At the 3rd floor, the man paused and pulled something small from his shoe. It shined white under the bright light. Not metal, ceramic, sharp as any blade Damien had ever seen in training. His stomach dropped. This was not fear. This was real. Damien pulled out his phone to call hotel security, but stopped himself halfway through dialing. He remembered Adriana's words from 20 minutes earlier. Nobody would believe the maintenance man they just accused of theft. He needed proof, or he needed to stop this himself. He chose to keep following. At the 4th floor, the man in gray stopped fast and turned around. Damien froze against the wall, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. For 3 long seconds, neither man moved. Then the stranger turned back and kept walking, never seeing the maintenance worker pressed flat against the cold cement. Damien let out the breath he had been holding. His hands felt cold and steady at the same time, an old feeling from an old life he thought he had left behind for good. The man reached the 4th floor and slipped through a door marked staff only. Damien followed at a slow distance, staying low, staying silent. Inside, the private reception buzzed with quiet talk and clinking glasses. 41 guests, unaware that death walked among them in a borrowed suit. Damien scanned the room fast, the way he had been trained years ago. He found his target right away. A silver-haired man sat at table 9, laughing with 2 co-workers. Damien didn't know his name yet, but he recognized the slow distance the security team kept, like they knew this man mattered. The room smelled like warm bread and expensive flower scent, 2 smells fighting for space in the air. Somewhere a string band played something soft and slow. Waiters moved between tables, with silver trays, slow and quiet, trained never to break into a talk. None of the 41 guests saw the small warning signs Damien saw everywhere now. The way one security guard kept checking his watch instead of the room. The way the string band's music covered small sounds near the back wall. The way the man in gray had placed himself just between 2 exits. Something terrible was about to happen inside this beautiful room. Only one man in a stained work shirt knew what it was. The man in gray moved toward table 9 with slow, casual steps. His hand drifted toward his sleeve. 3 seconds. That was all Damien had to decide. He moved. Damien crossed the room fast, weaving between waiters carrying trays of champagne. A tray clattered to the floor behind him. Heads turned. Adriana Mercer stood near the bar, and her eyes locked onto Damien instantly. Security. He's back again, she shouted, pointing right at Damien. Someone stop him. Garrison, her personal bodyguard, stood 6'5" and built like a refrigerator. He grabbed Damien's arm. Before Damien could reach the man in gray, Garrison's fist swung fast, connecting hard with Damien's jaw. Pain exploded white behind his eyes. Damien staggered back, but did not go down. Blood filled his mouth, warm and metallic. He spat once, and kept his eyes locked on the real threat, now only 15 feet from table 9. There's a knife, Damien said, his voice low and urgent. Ceramic blade. That man in gray. He's lying, Adriana snapped. He's the one causing trouble. Garrison, get him out of here. Garrison grabbed Damien's shoulder again, ready to drag him toward the exit. Damien twisted free, with a move learned in a training gym in Virginia, years and lifetimes ago. Garrison stumbled back, more shocked than hurt. The room fell into sudden silence. Even the air conditioning seemed to hush itself for a moment. 41 guests froze mid-motion, their glasses paused halfway to their lips. Somewhere nearby, a clock ticked softly, each second stretching longer than it should. The man in gray reached table 9. His hand slid the ceramic blade free from his sleeve. The silver-haired man kept laughing, totally unaware. 2 seconds. Damien did not think. He ran. 1 second. The blade rose toward the silver-haired man's neck, catching a flash of chandelier light. 0. Damien's hand closed around the attacker's wrist mid-swing. He twisted hard, using the man's own force against him. Bone cracked. The blade clattered to the marble floor, spinning once before going still. The attacker screamed and dropped to his knees, his wrist bent at a wrong angle. Damien pinned him face down, with a knee between his shoulder blades. He had done this move 100 times before, in places far from Boston. The room stayed frozen for 3 more heartbeats. Then the silver-haired man at last saw the blade near his feet and went pale as paper. Somebody call the police, Damien said calmly. And check his shoe. There's a second blade hidden in the heel. Real hotel security at last arrived, guns drawn, radios crackling. They stared at the scene, confused about who to trust. Garrison stood frozen, his fist still raised, from moments earlier, his mouth slightly open. Boston police officers arrived 4 minutes later, moving fast through the lobby, with heavy boots. They cuffed the attacker, while he still groaned on the floor, his wrist puffy dark purple already. One officer radioed for an ambulance, his voice clipped and quick over the static. A young officer named Delgado knelt beside Damien, checking him for injuries. You did all this? He asked, glancing at the pinned attacker, and then back at Damien's split lip. Just reacted, Damien said softly. Didn't have time to think about it. Delgado studied him for a moment longer, something like respect slowly forming behind his eyes. You move like you've done this before. Military? Something like that, Damien answered, and said nothing more. Adriana pushed through the crowd. Her face had lost all its earlier color. What is happening here? She demanded, though her voice had lost its sharp edge. One of the security officers knelt beside the attacker and found the second blade just where Damien said it would be. He looked up at Damien, with new eyes full of questions. Sir, how did you know that? The officer asked. Damien said nothing at first. He just held the job, keeping the attacker pinned, while backup secured the scene. His breathing stayed even and slow, like a man doing ordinary work. 14 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the Sovereign Hotel. Government agents in dark coats walked through the lobby with quiet power. Adriana watched from the front desk, her arms crossed tight against her chest, still trying to know. A tall woman in a navy coat walked straight up to Damien, ignoring everyone else in the room. She held out her hand. Agent Voss, she said. Didn't expect to find you here. The room went silent again, this time from shock rather than fear. You know him? Adriana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone in the service knows him," the woman replied. Damien Voss spent 9 years protecting foreign big leaders. He has 3 awards most agents only dream about. She pulled out a folder and handed it to the hotel's head of security. Inside were government documents, an old badge photo, and case numbers stamped with government seals. "You called him a thief," someone in the crowd murmured. "He just saved Mr. Whitfield's life." The silver-haired man, now named as shipping boss Nathaniel Whitfield, walked over slowly. His hands still trembled slightly at his sides. "You saved my life," Whitfield said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't even know your name." Damien Voss." Whitfield's hands still shook as he spoke. He had flown from the Netherlands that morning for a simple business meeting, never once thinking his life stood on the edge of a knife. His 2 co-workers stood close by, pale and silent, still trying to know how close they had come to watching a murder. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you really were?" Whitfield asked. "Would it have mattered?" Damien replied softly. "This morning, nobody believed a maintenance worker deserved to stand near the VIP area." His words landed heavy in the silent room. Adriana flinched like she had been struck. 3 miles away, at Lincoln Elementary School, a 6-year-old girl sat at her desk drawing a picture of her father in a superhero cape. She had no idea what had just happened inside the Sovereign Hotel. She only knew he always came to get her at 3:15, and she planned to show him her drawing the moment she saw him. Nobody at that reception knew about the little girl waiting across town. But she was the real reason Damien moved so fast. She was also the reason he ran toward the danger instead of away from it. The hotel's owner arrived 20 minutes later, alerted by frantic calls from 3 different directors. He walked straight to Damien, ignoring Adriana totally, and shook his hand with both of his own. "Mr. Voss, I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Whatever you need, name it." "I need my job," Damien said just. "I need to pick up my daughter from school at 3:15. The owner blinked, shocked by the small request, after such a large act of courage. Then he nodded slowly, getting something deeper in the man standing before him. Adriana stood apart from the crowd, watching everyone praise the man she had shamed. Her earlier sureness had drained totally from her face. She remembered her own words echoing back at her, sharp and ugly now that she heard them from the outside. The hotel's security chief walked up holding a small tablet. "Ma'am, the hall cameras caught everything from this morning," he said slowly, "including your comments to Mr. Voss." Adriana had approved those cameras herself 6 months earlier, insisting on higher security standards throughout the building. She never imagined they would record her own worst moment for everyone to see. "Play it," the owner said softly. The tablet screen showed the morning hall, Damien on his ladder, Adriana's sharp voice filling the recording. "This handyman looks like he's hanging around the VIP area to steal something." The words sounded even colder played back through a small speaker. Several staff members looked away, embarrassed for her. Garrison stared at the floor, his earlier sureness gone totally. He had thrown a punch at a man who turned out to be just what stood between 41 people and disaster. Adriana's hands began to shake. She had spent years building a good name for strict rules and perfect control. Now that good name cracked apart in front of everyone who mattered to her career. Her father had built 2 hotels from nothing, starting with a single motel off a highway in Ohio. He raised Adriana to believe that image was everything. Clean shoes meant a clean soul. Wrinkled clothes meant a wrinkled heart. She had followed his rules since she was old enough to walk in heels. Nobody ever taught her to look past a uniform. Nobody ever taught her that a tired man fixing a light bulb might have already saved lives. He may have saved more lives than she would ever meet in her whole career. That lesson arrived today, sharp and sudden, in front of every top boss in the building. A young front desk clerk named Priya stood near the wall, watching everything unfold with wide eyes. She had heard Adriana's harsh words to workers before, more times than she could count. She had never seen the moment catch up with her boss like this. It happened in front of government agents, in a room full of trembling guests. "Maybe now things will change around here," Priya whispered to another clerk standing beside her. The other clerk only nodded, still staring at the badge photo on the tablet screen. By dinner time, The story had spread to every floor of the Sovereign Hotel. Housekeepers talked about it while folding towels. Cooks talked about it between orders in the hot kitchen. Even the valet drivers outside stopped to whisper about the quiet man. They were usually too busy to notice anything but car keys. Nobody talked about the ceramic blade anymore. They talked instead about respect and about how easy it was to miss what truly mattered in a person. A few workers admitted something softly, only to each other. They too had judged Damien by his uniform at some point that year. Ruiz heard the story from 3 different people before lunch. He found Damien near the supply closet, shaking his head in disbelief. "All this time," Ruiz said, "and you never said one word." "Wasn't anyone's business," Damien replied. "I just wanted a normal job." "Well," Ruiz said, clapping him gently on the shoulder, "you got a strange way of staying normal, my friend." "I was wrong," she said, so softly that only a few people heard her. Then louder, forcing the words out. "I was totally wrong about you." Damien looked at her for a long moment. He was not a man who enjoyed watching someone break down, even someone who had shamed him hours earlier. "You judged me by my uniform," he said. "You're not the first person to make that mistake. You won't be the last." "That doesn't make it right," Adriana said, tears at last spilling down her cheeks. "I said those things in front of everyone. I embarrassed you for doing your job." "Yes, you did," Damien agreed just. He did not soften the truth to make her feel better. The hotel owner placed a hand on Adriana's shoulder. "We will discuss your job later today," he said, his voice firm, but not unkind. "For now, Mr. Voss needs medical attention for his jaw." A paramedic checked Damien's face, showing a small crack along his jawbone. Garrison approached slowly, his big body looking smaller than before. "I'm sorry," Garrison said. "I hit you because she told me to. I should have asked questions first." "You were doing what you thought was right," Damien replied. "Next time, look a little closer before you swing." Garrison nodded, accepting the quiet correction without argument. Something in Damien's calm voice made arguing feel pointless, even foolish. He offered his hand, and Damien shook it, his grip firm despite the puffy along his jaw. 2 men who had clashed only minutes earlier now stood, as something closer to allies, bound by a strange and sudden mourning. News of the attack spread through the hotel staff within the hour. People started talking out loud. The maintenance man everyone barely saw had stopped the killing in under 3 seconds, using nothing but his bare hands. By that afternoon, the main office had already called twice, asking many questions about hotel security rules. Adriana handled both calls alone, her voice clearly smaller than it had been that morning. Garrison sat alone in the break room during his lunch, staring at his untouched sandwich. He had worked as a bodyguard for 9 years, first in the military and then in private security. He had never once hit an innocent man before today, and the memory of his own fist connecting with Damien's jaw made his stomach turn. He thought about his own son, 12 years old, and already taller than most grown men. He thought about what his boy would say if he saw his father throw a punch based on nothing but someone else's angry pointing. Garrison pushed the sandwich away, hunger gone totally. Later that day, he found Damien near the loading dock, packing up his tools for the evening. "I keep replaying it," Garrison admitted. "The second before I swung. I didn't even look at your hands. I just heard her voice and reacted." "That's how they train bodyguards," Damien said, not unkindly. "React first, think later. Except the training is supposed to include looking first." Garrison nodded slowly, turning that thought over in his mind. "I'm putting in for new training," he said. "Starting Monday. Full calm-down course, not just the physical stuff." "That's a good start," Damien said, and for the first time, that day, something like a small smile crossed his tired face. Damien finished his paperwork with the government agents by early afternoon. Agent Whitmore, the woman in the navy coat, offered him something unexpected before leaving. "The service would take you back tomorrow, if you wanted," she said. "You'd get your old job back. Your old rank, your old pay." Damien thought about Mia's laugh, her missing front tooth, the way she waited by the window every evening for him to walk up the street. He thought about bedtime stories and quiet Sunday mornings with pancakes. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but I already have the job that matters most to me." Agent Whitmore studied his face for a moment, then nodded with clear respect. I hear you. If you ever change your mind, you know how to find us. She shook his hand firmly and walked toward the waiting SUVs outside. Damien gathered his tool cart from where he had left it that morning, still sitting near the east stairway where this whole day began. The light he had been fixing still flickered weakly above him. Adriana appeared beside him, her earlier hard edge totally gone. Let me help you, she said softly, reaching for one end of the ladder. You don't have to do that, Damien said. I know, she replied. I want to. They worked together in silence, fixing the small flickering light that had started this entire chain of events. When the bulb at last clicked into place and stayed steady, something between them shifted too, quiet and small but real. I judge people fast, Adriano admitted, staring up at the now steady light. My father raised me to believe appearances mean everything. Clothes, titles, the right last name. I built my whole career believing that. Appearances lie, Damien said just. I learned that a long time ago. I protected people who looked powerful but were scared inside. I protected other people who looked plain but carried whole nations on their backs. Adriana was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? To my job, I mean. That's not up to me, Damien said. But if you're asking whether I want you fired, I don't. I want you to remember this morning every time you look at someone in a uniform. 3 weeks later, the Sovereign Hotel held a small ceremony in the lobby, away from cameras and press. The owner presented Damien with a formal award, along with a modest bonus of $2,200. More bigly, they created a new job for him, Director of Guest Safety Awareness. The lobby smelled like fresh flowers. That morning, big white lilies arranged in tall glass vases near the front desk. Someone had polished the brass railings until they shone like gold under the chandelier light. 40 or so staff members gathered softly, coffee cups in hand, waiting for the short speech to begin. Ruiz, Damien's old supervisor, stood near the front, with his arms crossed and a proud grin on his face. He had worked with Damien for over a year, without ever guessing the quiet man's past. Now the whole hotel knew, and Ruiz seemed to enjoy telling anyone who would listen that he always sensed something special about his best worker. The owner cleared his throat and read from a small card. Sometimes the people who protect us the most are the ones we notice the least, he said. Damien Voss reminded all of us that respect should never depend on a job title or a uniform. The room clapped softly, and Damien nodded his thanks, uncomfortable with the attention, but grateful all the same. He kept glancing toward the door. He thought about picking Mia up later that day. That simple task mattered more to him than any title or bonus check. Someone had baked a small cake for the occasion, plain white frosting, with blue letters spelling out his name. It sat on a folding table near the front desk, next to a stack of paper cups and a pot of hot coffee. Damien cut the first slice and handed it to Ruiz, who accepted it like a man receiving a medal. Adriana stood near the back of the small crowd, no longer at the front demanding attention. She had spent the last 3 weeks working with the training department. Together they wrote new rules about respect for every worker, no matter what job they did. She approached Damien after the short ceremony ended. I started a school fund, she said, for children of hotel maintenance staff. $12,000 to begin with. I want Mia to be the first one picked, if that's okay with you. Damien studied her face, looking for the old hard edge that used to live there. He found something different now, something closer to true modesty. She'd like that, he said. She wants to be a teacher someday. Says teachers make people feel big. She sounds like her father, Adriana said, a small smile at last reaching her eyes. She had also started a new training program for every new hire at the Sovereign Hotel. The first lesson taught one simple rule. Never judge a person by their uniform, their shoes, or the calluses on their hands. She wrote that rule herself, and she made sure every manager signed it. That evening, Damien walked the familiar 3 blocks, from the bus stop to Mia's school, arriving at just 3:15 like always. She ran toward him across the playground, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, missing tooth showing through her wide smile. Daddy, guess what I learned today? She said, grabbing his hand tightly. What did you learn, baby? Mrs. Ferris said everybody has something special inside them, even if you can't see it from the outside. Damien smiled, thinking of ceramic blades, government badges, and a hall camera that had caught more truth than anyone expected that morning. Your teacher is just right, he said, squeezing her small hand. You should always remember that. Mia pulled a folded paper from her backpack and held it up proudly. It showed a stick figure man wearing a bright red cape, standing in front of a tall building with a yellow sun overhead. I drew you today, she said. You're my superhero. You always fix the lights, so nobody trips in the dark. Damien took the drawing slowly. He folded it along its worn creases. Then he tucked it into his jacket pocket, right next to the old photo of her mother. He did not tell her about the blade or the man in gray. Some stories were not meant for 6-year-old ears, not yet. Thank you, baby, he said instead. This is the best gift I've gotten all year. They walked home together under a soft October sky, an ordinary father and daughter, invisible to most people who passed them on the street. The laundromat below their apartment hummed its familiar tune as they climbed the narrow stairs together. That night, after story time and 2 songs and 1 extra glass of water, Damien sat alone at the small kitchen table. He pulled out his old government badge from a drawer. He had not touched it in 3 years. He turned it over slowly in his hands. He thought about Agent Whitmore's offer, about his old life full of danger and purpose. Then he thought about a small girl's drawing folded in his jacket pocket. He thought about bedtime songs and Sunday pancakes. He thought about a promise he made 2 winters ago beside a fresh grave. He put the badge back in the drawer and closed it gently. Some choices only needed to be made once. This one, he had already made, and he had no plans to unmake it now. Invisible never meant powerless. It just meant the world hadn't looked closely enough yet. Somewhere across Boston, a hall light flickered on and stayed steady, doing its small, quiet job the same way it always had.